Hey everyone, we're diving deep today into something I think we can all relate to: food and immunity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So many of you sent us this Nature article. Can your diet control your immune system? It
Yeah.
really made me stop and think, about what I'm eating.
Yeah, it really does make you think twice, doesn't it? It kind of challenges a lot of the traditional ideas about like healthy eating, and it's looking at specific things in food, like certain compounds and how they affect our immune systems, like at a molecular level.
It's pretty cool. I mean, instead of just hearing, eat your vegetables, it's like, well, why? What's going on there?
Exactly, yeah.
But the article also kind of brings up, some people are skeptical about nutrition science.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And I get it, right? You hear all these claims.
Yeah. Right, yeah, tons of overblown claims, and a lot of those studies have limitations for sure. But what's really exciting now is that researchers are using like all this cutting edge technology to really look at exactly how different compounds in our food are, like interacting with our immune cells. So we're seeing a real shift towards more rigorous science, which is great.
That's good to hear. It feels like, all this conflicting information.
Yeah, absolutely.
I read about a Food as Medicine summit. It was put on by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It seems like people are really starting to pay attention to this idea that food could be a powerful way to, improve our health.
Absolutely. It's really gaining traction. And, one area where we're seeing amazing breakthroughs is in understanding how obesity and the immune system are connected.
This is one of the parts that I found really interesting in the article.
Oh, yeah.
It talks about how obesity is linked to a higher risk of certain autoimmune conditions, like psoriasis. Like, what's the connection there? I mean, how does being overweight have to do with your immune system kind of going haywire?
It's a big question, that researchers are really trying to understand now, and they're finding some pretty fascinating connections.
Yeah.
So, for example, this immunologist, Stephen Van Dyken, has been studying chitin,
Okay.
which is a type of fiber that's found in things like mushrooms, crustaceans and insects.
No, that's interesting to me because when I think of fiber, I think of, digestion.
Right.
So how does that tie into immunity?
Yeah, so what he was looking at was how chitin interacts with something called type 2 immunity. And they found that mice that didn't have a specific enzyme to digest chitin, they actually gained less weight, and they had better insulin sensitivity when they were fed chitin.
So their bodies weren't processing the chitin properly,
Right, exactly.
and that somehow messed with their metabolism.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, right? It seems like what's happening is the chitin is triggering the release of this hormone called GLP-1, which plays a role in making you feel full. And you might recognize GLP-1 because it's actually what some of those newer weight loss drugs target.
Oh, wow. So could we maybe, use that somehow, like mess with how our bodies react to chitin and come up with new treatments for obesity?
Yeah, it's definitely a very promising area for research.
That's amazing.
And it just shows you how, like, everything is connected. Our diet, our immune system, our health, it's all intertwined. But, the obesity and immunity link doesn't stop there. There was another study that I thought was super interesting.
Yeah, the article talked about the link between obesity and psoriasis.
Right, exactly.
So I'd like to know more about that.
So in this study, it was led by an immunologist named Sharon Lai. And they were looking at a specific type of T cell that helps to keep the inflammation from psoriasis under control. What they found was that these T cells were way less, reduced in obese mice. And they saw similar things when they looked at cells from people with psoriasis.
So it seems like obesity could actually be making it harder for the body to keep that inflammation in the skin under control, which could then lead to psoriasis.
Exactly.
We're talking about a direct link, not just, some kind of loose association.
Exactly. A direct link, yeah. And, that opens up a lot of possibilities for treatments and prevention.
Wow. Okay. So we talked about what happens when you restrict food.
Right.
What about the other side of it, like overeating?
Yeah.
What does that do to our immune systems?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So the article talked about something called feast diets, which is basically, what happens when we load up on those high-fat, low-fiber foods.
Oh, I know a few of those.
Like holiday feasts or, that weekend of pizza and ice cream. We've all been there, right?
Yeah. But does a few days of going overboard, does that really affect your immunity that much?
Well, Francesco Siracusa, he did some research that showed that just 3 days on a low-fiber, high-fat diet
Yeah.
actually suppressed the immune systems of mice, and it made them more likely to get infections.
3 days.
3 days, yeah.
That's a quick turnaround.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like the main culprit there is the lack of fiber.
Okay.
It basically disrupts the gut microbiome, which is super important for those T cells we've been talking about. And what's really interesting is they saw a similar effect on T cells in a small study with human volunteers, too.
Wow. So even those short-term things, like what you choose to eat, even for a few days, can have a real impact. It really makes you stop and think about what you're putting in your body.
Yeah, absolutely, even on those, like, cheat days. But, those effects were temporary. However, studying these kinds of short-term shifts can give us a lot of clues about how chronic conditions might develop. It's all about understanding those underlying
It's
mechanisms.
amazing how much we're learning about this right now. So complex.
It is.
But you were saying earlier how, like, it's really hard to study long-term dietary changes in people.
Yeah, it's a big challenge
Yeah.
because, getting people to stick to a specific diet for months or years, that's really hard.
Right.
And if you just rely on people reporting what they ate, that's not always accurate. So how do you study it?
Yeah.
Well, some researchers are doing these studies where they actually have volunteers live in a research hospital, like for weeks, so they can
Wow.
control what they eat and see what happens.
That's dedication.
Oh, yeah. So Kevin Hall and Yasmin Belkay, they're an integrative physiologist and an immunologist, and they did this study where they compared a ketogenic diet and a vegan, low-fat diet.
Two very different ways of eating.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
They had 20 volunteers, and it lasted for 4 weeks.
Huh.
And what they found was fascinating. Both of those diets led to changes in, like, the number of immune cells and gene activity in just 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly our bodies respond, right?
Yeah.
Now, these are preliminary findings, but, they really highlight the potential for using diet to treat a whole range of conditions.
It's like all these things we've been talking about, the chitin, the fasting, those low fiber feasts, all these different diets. It really seems like food can have a huge effect on our immune system.
Absolutely. And while we need more research, these studies are a huge step forward in understanding how we can use diet not only to prevent disease, but maybe even to treat it.
It's pretty amazing. This is all really fascinating.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we need to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to dig into even more research on the link between diet and immunity, so don't go anywhere.
Stay tuned. And, when we talk about treating diseases, one area that's really exciting is how we might use diet to make cancer immunotherapy work even better.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So you're saying like using food to help our bodies fight cancer.
Yeah, exactly. There's this study in 2021 that found that people with melanoma who were also on immunotherapy, if they ate a high-fiber diet, they actually had better survival rates. And then in mice, they found that a low-fiber diet actually made them have fewer of those cancer-fighting T cells near their tumors.
It's amazing how fiber just keeps coming up over and over again. Like it's so important for our immune systems.
It is. It's really remarkable. And it kind of shows that we need to be looking beyond, just general advice about diet and really focusing on the specific parts of food and how they, work with our bodies at a really tiny level.
Yeah, and I think, we talked earlier about nutrition science not always having the best reputation. It seems like all this new research is really giving us some solid evidence to work with.
I think so too.
All right.
It feels like we're moving away from just like vague recommendations and towards something more targeted, like really understanding how things work and then using that knowledge to help people.
It's pretty exciting stuff, but I think a lot of people listening are probably thinking, okay, this is all great, but how do I actually use this information in my own life?
Right. It's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, even though we still have a lot more to learn, there are a couple of things we can take away from all of this. First of all, it's pretty clear now that what we eat has a big impact on our immune system, not just in the short term, but in the long term too.
Yeah, it's not just about like avoiding a cold. It's about potentially preventing some serious chronic diseases by, making smart choices about our food.
Exactly. And the second thing is, all of this points to how important personalized nutrition is. We all have different needs, right? Our genes are different, our lifestyles are different. So what works for one person might not work for another.
Right. It's kind of like the idea of personalized medicine, but with food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really where this whole field of nutrition immunology is going. As we learn more about how food and our immune systems interact, we'll be able to come up with, really specific dietary plans for people to help with all kinds of health problems.
That's amazing. Like, imagine a future where doctors are prescribing specific foods or food compounds to, like, treat diseases.
It could happen, yeah.
Yeah.
And while we're not quite there yet, these new discoveries are really setting the stage for, all kinds of amazing possibilities.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting. Like, we're really starting to see food in a whole new light. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just fuel, it's like medicine. It has the potential to really heal us.
I agree. It's very powerful. And the more we understand, the better choices we can make to support our health and well-being.
This has been such an amazing deep dive into the world of food and immunity. So before we wrap up, is there like one big takeaway you hope people will remember from all of this?
I think the main thing is we're moving beyond that old school idea of, one size fits all dietary advice. The future of nutrition is personalized, and it's all about understanding that complex dance between our food, our genes, our lifestyle, and how that all affects our immune systems.
It's not just eat your vegetables. It's like which vegetables, how much, and when.
Right.
Right, for you specifically.
Exactly. And that's what makes all of this so exciting. We're on the cusp of a real revolution in how we think about food and its ability to heal.
Well, I'm really glad we had this conversation today. It's mind-blowing to think about the potential food has to really change our health for the better. But before we go, I have to ask you, knowing all of this now, is there one thing, like one food, you might add or take away from your diet to support your immune system?
Hmm, that's a good question.
Hmm.
I think for me, based on all of this, I'm even more convinced about how important fiber is. So I might try adding in more like legumes, whole grains, and just more variety of fruits and vegetables. How about you?
Well, all this talk about keto has got me thinking about eating more mushrooms. I mean, they're delicious. You can do so much with them. And now I'm learning they might even help my metabolism.
It really is amazing how much we're still learning about this whole world of nutrition and immunity. I can't wait to see what new discoveries come next.
Me too. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has made you curious and given you some food for thought about how connected what you eat is to how you feel.
Don't forget, knowledge is power. The more we understand about our bodies, the better we can take care of them. So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those great questions.
And that's it for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another fascinating look at the cutting edge of science. See you then.
All this talk about boosting your immunity, I see that everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy to be skeptical, but it sounds like maybe there is some real science behind it now.
Yeah, I think so too. It's not like there's just one magic thing that works for everyone.
But all this research really shows us that what we eat can make a big difference in how well our immune systems work.
It's almost like food is like a language,
Hmm.
and our bodies understand it.
I like that. Yeah.
And now we're finally starting to figure out how to, speak it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And as we learn more about this language, we can actually start to communicate better with our bodies and really give them what they need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this amazing deep dive, what's the one thing you really want listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the most important thing is that we're moving past those old ideas about, one-size-fits-all diets.
Right.
The future of nutrition is going to be personalized.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how our food, our genes, our lifestyles, and our immune systems all work together.
It's not just eat your vegetables. It's like which vegetables, how much,
Yeah.
and when.
Right, exactly. And that's what makes this whole field so exciting. We're on the edge of a whole new way of thinking about food and how it can actually heal us.
Well, I am so excited to see where all of this research goes next. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to think differently about how what you eat can affect how you feel.
Absolutely. And don't forget, food can be a powerful tool for a healthy immune system. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those great questions.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating look at the cutting edge of science.